We have a privilege today to welcome Professor Michael Song, a very accomplished professor, entrepreneur, investor, academic, wears many hats, got his PhD at MIT, and runs the FinTech Institute at Fudan University in China. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Well, there's so much you've done, so much you want to do based on what we learned about you. Tell us about your journey, the academic journey that got you in this space, and the journey that keeps you going in the direction you're heading.
I'm a pretty technically oriented background. Got my PhD at the MIT Media Lab, kind of combining really early, in the industry, sort of AI, big data, related to wearable technologies, which now you can frame it as IoT, and also looking at ways to apply these technologies for patterns in human behavior. So my first quantitative measure for compression using different physiological signals. So basically, that's how my background. But while in school, I kind of got that entrepreneurship bug, started doing a lot of entrepreneurial activities. Knew by the time I graduated, that was the direction that I was very interested in. So basically, setting up a path for the next almost 20 years now. I'm a serial entrepreneur, where I started a number of companies, primarily in the new material semiconductor space. So we started a solar company, a couple of semiconductor companies. So started learning how to take really early stage technology, IP, and starting funding with the management team, commercializing with applied research, and then building out manufacturing. So at 0 to 1 type stuff. Became commercialization, let's say, experts. And then in '08, I was just about to receive funding for several projects and lost it during the crisis. So I pivoted out to Hong Kong, and then once I got down to Asia, realized the potential there. And then I moved to in 2010. To China, started my first company, which was a daily company in China, and basically, we have a saying in Chinese. It's called "paying the tuition," 交学费. And so,
what does that mean?
It means that business practices are extremely different in China than in the West. And so basically, while I was thinking about doing a certain style business and building a tech company, my business partners were doing real estate deals, leveraging the reputation and building up the technology to accommodate. So anyway, that was my first experience in China. Actually, it was very eye-opening. It actually set me on a path of understanding how to do business in China, which I think expert is doing that. And basically started learning how to try to be a bridge between international into China. So I started doing what I call cross-border tech transfer, or venture building, where I basically take high-tech technologies that I think have a footprint in China. I developed a very unique model to be able to, I would say, a lot of business model innovation, how to scale these sort of technology businesses in a way that benefits both sides. Because usually companies abroad, when they work with China, it's a less than endearing experience. Usually on the Chinese side, will leverage and eventually gobble up So I created a business model specific to leverage their capabilities, but to have the best of both worlds, to be able to take this disruptive technology and access the China market and work with industry partners to scale, do that very quickly, such that it's kind of a win-win. Basically, both sides, are beneficiaries of this process, and the goal is to, I consider myself a business model expert. Okay, so business innovation expert. as my core sort of focus, how to get these parts to connect. And so over the years, has been able to transfer some significant technologies to China. And now these days, really focused on two areas in particular. One is AI technologies, and the other is blockchain technology. I think both these instances, the world is going to be radically disrupted across all industries, and these are the two tools by which it's going to happen. And they all have to be digital, which allows you to scale much faster than traditional sort of manufacturing. So started focusing on that. And I have a grand vision about how these technologies can enable the world for good, and how to do things in a way so that it's a win-win.
Interesting. So interesting segue. The East and West that you talked about, it seems like you're at a very unique vantage point. You're schooled in the West, but you're essentially schooling and enabling in the East. And as I'm seeing trends coming out of both East and West, especially US and China, not just in trade warfare, but even technology things, like your point, how you venture building and innovating and sort of amplifying abilities across the board for different governments and organizations. Talk about the larger global trends, like you said, AI and blockchain, with the lens of China versus US. How the US or the US-centric companies, all the big ones that we all use, and the Amazons and the Microsofts of the world, versus the Chinese folk, the Alibabas, the JDs, and so many others. What are the few tenets that are different in the approaches? Again, kind of the adage, my AI is better than yours, or my blockchain is better than yours. What would be your take on the true differences and similarities, if you will, on the two approaches and how they're sort of taken into the market?
Well, this is a very interesting question. Actually, I about a year and a half ago, at an event talking about exactly this. Its focus was the AI war, if you will, right? Between the East and West. This is actually, by the way, timing-wise, right before the whole trade war thing really broke off. So this is kind of proceeding, and it was interesting because I had not been in the States. I've been out of the States for almost a decade. Right? And so, coming into this talk, I was asked to be provocative. And so I came into, I always want to have some slightly controversial sort of message that comes from a different angle than what the popular media, of course, talks about. So I came in saying, well, there isn't really an AI war, because if there was, China already won. And this is coming at a time where magazines are talking about comparing the US with China and whatever, and saying, well, who's ahead? China seems to be catching up. And my perspective in seeing what was happening on the ground in China gives a unique perspective, which is, at the time, people were saying, okay, and are still saying, well, US is in the lead because we've got Google, DeepMind, we've got the quality research, right? In terms of actual top-level AI researchers that can actually go and start significant research agendas and programs post-PhD. If you use the numbers, it's like 20,000, 25,000 engineers around the world who can do this, right? And out of those, Google has sucked up, or American companies like Amazon have sucked up much of this talent. And these are the ones that are posting in the top journals, and therefore, Google still has a lead in this fundamental research. Totally true, right? But if you look at China, China has been rapidly rising in these publication journals. If you look at the strict number of patents and papers, actually China has overtaken. But the argument was that the highest quality talent is still U.S. companies.
So just the market is better, probably. Is that
well, no, I would say fundamentally it's not market. I mean, you give it to Google and DeepMind. I mean, they are the leadership, and they are the bleeding edge, and they are, I would say, significantly more advanced in the the typical China companies. Now, however, China, right, is a different animal. I have to maybe take a step back and explain how China innovates its scale. Sure. So I had a solar company when China decided to go solar. I had an LED company when LED decided to go China decided to go strong in LED. And then now I'm looking at AI and robotics and this kind of thing. In each of these cases, China in the beginning, when China decides to do this, is literally 25 years or more, decades behind the US leadership in technology, innovation, scale of business, everything. Okay. So
is it because, and I'll interject a question in there as well, is it because the university system, the research system is not as historic, embedded with business? That
absolutely, for up until extremely recently, the goal of China was to emulate Silicon Valley. So the educational ecosystem with the industrial ecosystem has created a lot of innovation and innovation thinking. I would say some cultural aspects have put U.S. firmly in the lead in the world. And China is a developing economy that has just come out of a cultural revolution a few decades ago, playing significant. Okay, so in that context, let's just talk solar, right? Solar industry, China decides to go with the biggest solar. This is early 2000s, right? And at that time, I had a solar company. And at that time, you talk to anybody in the industry, if solar was something that the U.S. leadership should be worried about China approaching on their turf, they would have laughed. I can't even see China in the rearview mirror. Okay, but lo and behold, China goes and invests billions of dollars. Okay, when China invests in central government, 5 years, in 5 years you're going to go and take over. So they go and invest billions of dollars, which is a significant multiple of the rest of the world. And even though I was in China at the time already, I was sitting there going, that investment was highly inefficient. Like I would say 70-80% of it nearly goes into people's pockets and just disappears, right?
So
corruption and things like that, right? And the other 20% is spent on really low-level me-too technology, whatever, not competitive at all. Yeah. But what happens is the sheer volume of investment, and you got 1.3 billion people, just working because that's become a national priority. That a few champions get competitive technology. It's definitely 3 generations behind what everyone else is doing over the U.S. in terms of efficiency and things like this. But it's competitive to be commercial. And then they pour money into that, and then because the sheer investment into the commercialization, as well as the fact that China has an indigenous market that is dwarfs the rest of the world combined, means that commercial engine gets to scale much faster than the US. Okay. So at the time, Germany was the only place that was really massively deploying solar, and China comes in at a multiple of Germany's solar output every year, gigawatts every year. And basically what happens is, in less than 7 years, less than basically half a decade, you see China go from, you can't even see the rearview mirror, to 1, 2, and 3 in terms of companies that are producing, and number 1 by far as a multiple in the rest of the world in terms of market. It has the whole engine itself. It starts to spin like this, and it goes to 90% of the world's supply and things like that. Now at this point, China wins because commercially it has developed scale much faster than anyone else. And at this point, they start acquiring almost bankrupt U.S. companies with less tech.
Yeah.
Right.
And so embedding that into their own technological advancements and
right. And so basically in half a decade, China goes from 0 to hero, and it's unstoppable. You don't compete with China, but do not compete with LED. And so likewise in AI and robotics, it's the same thing. Okay? China has a policy by 2025 to be world level, which means on par with Germany and Japan for robotics. For AI, it's at that level in 2025, and they literally say that they want to be world dominating by 2030. They toned down that rhetoric a little bit because of the trade war, but sorry, that was the plan.
But that's still the aspiration, so to speak.
Well, so let's look back now. I was explaining the net dynamics, but now let's look back and see where that has taken AI. Right? So why 2 years ago am I already saying that China won the war? It's not competitive, whatever. Everyone else, you look at the headlines and economists and things like that, people are like, who's winning, look at this and that, and I'm like, they won. Because I see the dynamic. I've seen this pattern. And this is an unstoppable pattern where right now it's not so, people are still thinking about the rearview mirror thing, but they don't see the dynamic. Okay? And so the same thing is playing out. AI is massively being deployed in China. And there's literally AI tech parks with billions of dollars. Each one of these tech parks, there's a dozen of them in China. Each one dwarfs the national budget in the US for AI.
And when you say AI is massively deployed, talk about the embedding it or integration into everyday lives.
Okay.
Give us some examples.
Let's talk about this.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's exactly where China is. The US is fundamentally ahead in fundamental research. Again, we haven't seen it. Okay. However, China, again, is the one building patent technologies. Right? So deep learning is now commoditized. So the application of deep learning to facial recognition, to video recognition, to image recognition, into voice NLP. In all these cases, not world-leading research, but the technology has been commercialized to a point where it's practically usable, right? And then China has a much larger advantage than anyone else in the world. You know why? Because the sheer amount of people and data, and the policies that allow that data to be accessed. There's less privacy for better for worse. So as an example, Google. There's a competition called ImageNet, which is like the Olympics for AI. Right? It's where they compete against to see who has the best face recognition. Now, the ImageNet repository is the top public repository of faces. It's around, if I remember correctly, something like last time I checked, it was like 6 million faces.
6 billion.
6 million faces. And then you go and you do your algorithm and you see who has better, test on that database and see who has better numbers. Now, for many years, I'm talking already half a decade, almost. It's not Google who's winning these competitions. It's a company called SenseTime, which I know very well because it came out of the Hong Kong ecosystem. I am still an investor at HKUST, SenseTime is the #1 unicorn, AI unicorn in China. And they have challenged Google at this competition for half a decade. Right? You might not know that. And the reason why is because while everyone else is training on 5 to 6 million faces, SenseTime is training on hundreds of millions of faces because they get they are working with all the banks to do facial rec as identification to log into their mobile app. Right. They're working with the police to be able to with their databases, which is upwards of 1 billion faces. So they have a 10 to 50x multiple amount of data, which for deep learning is what makes it work. Okay? In deep learning, you're just setting a bunch of switches. The more data you pour into it, those switches get more and more refined, and therefore you have a better.
The result comes out to be much better as well.
Yeah. Anyway, getting back to this concept. So I'm at this UN event, and I've been asked to speak about my perspective on who's winning this AI war. And so I say, well, there isn't really an AI war, but if there was, China already won. Right? And it was actually kind of shocking because, again, it came right at the time, right before the trade war really started intensifying. So I first time to the US and literally a decade, and I noticed a very very palpable response, because the room's filled with U.S. policymakers and military people, whatever, and people got a little bit wild by that emotion, right? And
what do you think that is? Is it because that their countrymen have led them to believe that they've got the best goods out of the market, and all of a sudden here's someone who's talking about that not being the case?
well, there's an anxiety. U.S. is frankly used to being a big kid, and they have had dominance over innovation and the whole financial market and the military and everything for decades.
And rightfully so. I think there's a lot of innovation that went in there to bring it up to that level as well.
Yeah. So it's correct, right? So there's an anxiety because they see number two coming up, and actually number two is quite foreign in culture and is not really aligned to the agenda of the U.S. Fully, right? And so there's an anxiety, right? And so I see that, right? And but my point wasn't that it's like watch out for China. My point was more like, okay, first of all, so in the question and answer, it's like, well, what do you think about this war? Why is China being so aggressive? What can we do about it? And I'm like, well, hold on a second, okay? China doesn't frame it as an AI war. Okay? The only media that's coming out saying, talking about AI wars is the media on the Western side. Mm-hmm. Okay? China frames it as a peaceful, they're trying to catch up and this kind of stuff. They're trying to be collaborative, and but there is this response that comes in.
So interesting you say that. So is this a new, sort of dominance play? Something between, we just learned at the conference, cyber and space and data and AI. Whoever dominates this dominates the rest as well. Talk about your perspective on this dominance, where one sort of dovetails into a leadership role versus the other. I'm not suggesting which one is which, but a collaborative rather than a very winner, runner-up, third position approach to AI, regardless of the wars.
Well, let's first talk about what the relative advantages are. Right? So again, we've already established that the U.S. is dominant in sort of fundamental research, right? And historically has had the ecosystem and the engineers and the best talent. All the Chinese promising talents are going to the U.S. to China. So they have that. Okay? But what is China? Well, China has the sort of central planning, long-term strategic vision. They will go and march along what they have 5-year plan, which is much more long-term and strategic than anything in the United States because of the political structure. Right? The politics in the U.S. basically balance between partisanship every 4 years potentially, whereas China is planning in terms of decades. Okay? There literally is a plan 20 years from now in phases of 5-year plans. And they have their investment is what we're talking like a 10x, sometimes 100x multiple. Definitely the US, but in many cases the rest of the world combined. And again, as I explained before, the dynamics, not only do they have the money to go and invest into fundamental research and invest into commercialization, but they have the market, which is the largest market in the world. In that market, if you look at, China has become completely digitized. There's no cash in China. So all the data is, from payments from Alibaba and WeChat Pay and things like that, is data that they can use to actually commercialize. So hands down, China, who is playing catch up, is number one in e-commerce and emerging new retail technology. Hands down. Okay, it's not even a competition. And they have all that data, which they can use to refine their algorithms and get a head start on that part. And then you got the policy, which is now training literally legions of AI researchers. Huawei alone is planning on training a million AI researchers over the next 10 years, right? And so, and then curricula for AI for undergraduate as well as high school level is being test bedded. At least I know the last I looked at 40 high schools and hundreds of campuses across China. So the pipeline of human talent is at another level of scale, which is important to do all the big data analytics that you need to do. And then you have a policy of an access to data. So I will point out that it's the wrong thing to think that China doesn't respect data privacy. Currently, that is a very ongoing point. However, even so, they understand that there's a lot of benefit from the data, and they allow that data to be used in a way that is extremely restricted in the U.S. Because I give one example. Google has been trying to get a basic set of health data from the National Health Service in London to do some basic testing. They've been doing lobbying for years to get that done. And right on the brink of when they will be able to get their data,
NHS just decided not to.
Well, the press gets a hold of it and just torpedo the deal. Now, all over China, there's hospital networks and systems. The governments which are giving multiple, we're talking 10, 100x multiple of what Google is getting in all sorts of domains, and because China's perspective is different, right? The benefit to society is so much better than the individual. It's not to say that they don't care about the individual, because there's still anonymization and things like that, but the personal privacy protections are so strong elsewhere in the world. You think GDPR in Europe now, it's highly restricted, and so therefore. Access to data, and data, as you know, is the digital oil which runs the new economy. Right? China has a much benefit. Now, I just want to follow up on your point.
Sure that. Yeah.
Which is how should it work, right? In a zero-sum game situation, pie is only so big, and one side versus the other is a winner takes all. You have game theoretical dynamics where everybody's just going to escalate and win. Because if there's an asymmetric advantage, then you need to use it. Because if you don't, the other side will use it according to game theory. Right? Mm-hmm. So there's literally been simulation research on this. Basically, if you have a society with zero-sum game dynamics, and now you have technology which is asymmetrically giving one side an advantage. Before you had clubs, right? And one club is marginally better than you have Iron Age, the Iron people come in better. That's like a 40% better advantage. But now with AI, you could be 100x better, right? And it's going to just
continue to get better and better, and the other people can't even catch up.
Yep, exactly. So if you have the mentality, which I think the U.S. does, right? Which is basically we need to win the war. There is a war. We've identified it as a war, and we need to win the war. Otherwise, this unknown, foreign, slightly scary, up and coming country is going to take our pieces of pie with us, right? And in that dynamic, it is asymmetric, and this will lead to the next Cold War, and which it has, right? My position is. Collaboration is always better than non-collaboration. So this is classic game theory. Okay? There's something called the prisoner's dilemma, right? Where it's a toy problem where you have two prisoners and they need to decide whether or not to collaborate to get out of jail. Right? So the dilemma is, as you do when the police catch two culprits, they separate them and try to deal with it. And try to get one side to flip on the other side. Now, if you look at the mathematics of it, right, it turns out that the dilemma is if both people collaborate with each other, then they both get out of jail. But if one person rats on the other person, then they're better off. The other person really gets screwed. And in the fourth case, they both rat on each other. They both screwed. Right? So if you do all the math, it turns out that it's always better, personally, to rat on the other person. It's always better. So. Therein lies the fundamental problem, right? Which is basically it's always better to clobber the other person. If I have nukes, I'm going to clobber you first because if you have, so that's the problem with competitive game game theory. Game theoretically, that's the solution. Now, there is a possibility. It's always better to collaborate. Right? So how do we create an infrastructure by which both sides collaborate, in which case both sides are better off? Okay. So I've been actually in my fintech research center exploring these concepts because basically the idea is now we have technology, right? We have blockchain, and we have smart contracts. And if you have smart contracts which can basically tell the other party, signal the other party, look, this is how we play the game. Right? The problem with the game theory is that you don't know if the person's going to do it or not. There's a little bit of bluffing, and you can basically renege on your work, and that's the problem. So you got to deal with the worst case, right? So that's why you always collaborate with the person. But if you have a smart contract and you can see the smart contract, what the other person is going to do, then you can optimize and then you can create complex scenarios where basically, okay, if you don't screw me, I won't screw you, and then you end up with a better state. So I believe this is very powerful. I believe that this will allow us to create win-win scenarios where both sides win. And this is what I want to do in general, doing a lot of this cross-border tech transfer. Right now, U.S. is like, don't give China anything to help them out because they're just catching up. Right? But actually, what's happening is by doing this, you accelerate China's timetable because they just double down on the resources, knowing that they cannot count on their counterparty for critical technologies like semiconductors and whatever else. Right? And my contention is it's a short-term pain for China, but the long-term, China's going to win because of the market and the resources and the wherewithal to be able to do it. So you're shooting yourself in the foot if you're the U.S. or the West. By doing this, what we need to do is create a collaborative framework and develop win-win, because this is an ancient economic.
Well, but I'll stop you in there. So if you look at history, you've always had, and we're getting away from technology and getting more into humanity and historical things as well. We've always had, nations, a group of nations that have governed nations, a group of nations. This almost dovetails into modern day colonialism, if you will. Right? You've got two sides that potentially have the ability to take on the next oil, the next currency, the next way of thinking, and through their technological advancements, understanding of the machine, and be able to program the machine, sort of influence their countries in their domain or people in their domain in their direction. Yeah. Don't you think people, these two sides or other sides will continue that? Because eventually, that's how the world's always worked. And you've always got multiple sort of myopic views, but in this case, we've got two big things coming up. And others would have to either follow suit, because there's almost no, if you look at a U.S. election situation, independent in this case is now winning. It's either the Dems or the Republicans.
They're both kind of anti-China at this point. Yeah.
So talk about this. U.S. being sort of one that would potentially have their own followers, and then others their own followers. Seems like you're almost giving two different mindsets. One more inclusive, one more exclusive.
Well, so we need to evolve as a society, right? In ways of thinking. Now, again, I've already pointed out the game theory of this, right? In the end, we both know that if we collaborate, we win. It's just a trust issue, right? And historically speaking, there was no trust. And historically speaking, it was colonialism, it was protectionism, right? And those things are very in vogue right now, right? Neo-colonialism. Right? So, basically, look, my country first, and I'm going to, just in a superficial way, block all the things that will prevent advantage of the person. So, my notion is that this is not the way forward. right? Getting to the point, there's this concept in economic theory called comparative. And we have two nations, and they, one, classically one's good at making fabric, and one's good at making bricks, right? It doesn't make sense for both countries to make both. The country doing that, with the better technology and better efficiency at making fabric should just do that and trade for the bricks on the other side, right? And that is more efficient.
Like a strength finder, play to your strength and continue on plowing through.
Right. So right now, with all these protectionism and stuff, that's exactly the opposite stuff. Right? Everybody needs to recreate their AI infrastructure. Everybody needs to, basically protect their turf, which has long-term inefficiencies. Right? Now, I'm thinking from the side of the U.S. I'm a proud of I grew up there, and I want to see best for what's happening in the U.S. The inclination, of course, is to say, okay, I'm, used to be a kid on the block right now, and we have an up-and-coming person, so I just need to just take him out. That's the game theory coming in. That's the competitive game theory. I just need to wipe him out, right? Not give him the advantage. But if you believe anything I said, the rise of China and the advantages in critical tech like AI and robotics and across the board, actually, in my thinking, it's only a matter of time. It's inexorable that China is going to get to the stage. At that point, if you are viewed as a extremely competitive and anti-China stance, right, the world is polarized. China right now wants to work with you. China wants to be collaborative in general. But if it's polarized, then they're just going to go to the and that's what we see is happening. Okay, fine. Take out Huawei. Right? Don't let them have any semiconductors. Trump has done more to accelerate China's
want and a path
to acquire semiconductors or develop indigenous capabilities of semiconductors than anyone else. It's interesting. It might be a little bit controversial.
No, it's not that. I think the way I take it is that China has realized, or Huawei in this case has realized that the world, especially from a cell phone technology perspective, is divided into just two. Either you're in the Apple world or the Google world with Android. You essentially need a third alternative, and both are, by the way, US led. So all the innovations or all the data gathering that's coming in through, regardless of whose data set you're using, Chinese or not, is essentially going to either Google or Apple. So I think whatever that triggered is interesting, and it should be taken into account for wherever China wants to take its technology and so forth. My question on that side is, let's come back to the technological piece, right? You talked about AI infrastructure. People will have to relook at that and so forth. It seems like the bigger countries, whether they're on the western side or the eastern side, that get it, that are investing in it, that are putting in time, effort, energy, money, will get to eventually something. What about the developing world? The developing world almost always have a need for leapfrogging. It just, every 10 years or so, it would attach themselves to the next big thing and, sort of start to get that same advantage of technology that maybe others are providing. And you've been spending a lot of time in Southeast Asia and Africa and other parts of the world. What do countries in general and companies in specific terms need to start looking towards in terms of policy, in terms of readiness, in terms of investments, in terms of partnerships, and so forth? Your take on that.
Well, technology, I think, is just a tool, right? And it can be used for good and bad. It can be used by the elites or by anyone else. And I think, I just gave a talk a few months ago at the Vatican, specifically for the Global Sustainability Network, to talk about the future of work, UN Sustainable Development Goal 8, future work and financial inclusion, and things like this. It's a great equalizer. Right? Every step of human society, it's always been about who has access to the means of production.
And information.
Information now, right? and who does not, right? And there's an asymmetric advantage of having it, and therefore you see this Gini coefficient getting more and more, more and more gap, because the people with the access to the data, access to the talent, access to the technology is pulling away. So this is unsustainable, because this will lead eventually to such income disparities that there will be revolution. Right? And so what we need to do is to empower the have-nots, right, with financial inclusion, with tools for AI, so that they can take advantage. So a big focus for me is to think about the strategies to do that. I think there's a huge opportunity for developing countries, because if you look at it, if you look at the UN list of any economy growing at more than 5%, anything in the 8 to 10%, it's all Southeast Asia, it's all Africa, right? It's parts of the Middle East. It's basically not the developing world. Right? And so the future growth engine and the future of humanity is in these developing areas. And there's a huge opportunity to have these areas leapfrog, because with cell phone penetration and things like that, you can immediately give people who don't have the credit access to give them an account using digital banking with a smartphone app. You can now empower them with commoditized AI technologies and big data solutions, so they can actually go and start to make an income for themselves. And this is a huge opportunity. So I'm very gung-ho about this essentially untapped market. I'm looking at different regions of the world where the dynamics are very different. And in some of these areas, the big countries are not looking, right?
So the outside-in approach is that technologies and the ways of these new ways of thinking come into these countries and so forth. What about the inside-out approach? What do these countries that are so rich with human capital, just a sheer population, and in many cases like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, so many other in these regions as well that have millennials. And Pakistan itself, out of 220 million population, has 135 million millennials that are coming to this country. What do they all need to do to start getting ready for this revolution, whether it's education, exposure, know-how? How do you solve that?
Well, certainly, I think the incumbent governments need to take a serious look at their policies, and I know that's a tall order sometimes. Right? But basically, if you want to have foreign direct investment into your country, and you want to, there's no free lunch. Okay? Basically, companies are going to come in, international companies are going to come in and develop the nation if the opportunities are there to be able to enable them to do so, right? And the comfort, the regulation, and the ease of doing business, and the safe, stable environment and frameworks of protection in place to give them comfort to do that. And so, actually, that's one area where I've been spending a lot of time. And I've advised sort of the ministerial level, governments in mostly Greater China, Hong Kong and Taiwan, and now China itself, on ecosystem building, on how to create cross-border tech environments, and how to do all this stuff. Right? And so, specifically, I have a very strong focus these days on fintech, because it's through these financial technologies where you can get a lot of investment, and you can align stakeholders to do interesting things, and the business model innovation is unlimited. And so I've been putting together the regulatory experts. Right? In the case of, say, blockchain and fintech technologies, leading territories include Singapore, Switzerland, and the US. The regulatory frameworks, best practices are being set. And so, we take the experts in these fields, plus the people with emerging technologies, which is now getting to be institutional grade, plus the legal experts, which are kind of make the frameworks that exist that people can actually do business. Plus all the other stakeholders. We can actually take the best of this and give it to developing countries' governments, as a vertically integrated solution to tell them how to do it. Now, they need to have the wherewithal to be able to want
to assume that and then sort of execute that as well.
Yeah.
Have you found any of these developing countries that, at least from a leadership perspective, right? Is there a nice example that's in the making? I'm assuming none of them are completely done yet, but is someone sort of taking that stride and saying, you know what, give us this template and you've seen some early results, maybe? That could be helpful.
Yeah, certainly. I think one good example that I've recently this year been exposed to more, had an opportunity to speak and visit is Pakistan. And in Pakistan, it's really eye-opening. As a Western educated person, and I think there's a lot of media exposure in this area. You have a certain notion of how see is. But on the ground, what I see is 220 million people, the sixth most populous nation in the world, with a very eager workforce, young, and extremely, with the government, by the way, which is very eager to open up to international involvement and also eager to build the country. So I see, on the ground dynamic, which is, it's much different than we say, viewing from this from America or other places where you don't have those things. So I see it as Pakistan as sort of China, just opening up, not really knowing what to do, needing a lot of expertise, but unbounded opportunity and growth potential. So I think if we can give the leadership tools to and the best practices together at the international world standard, then we can create a system where this untapped market or undeveloped market can interface more harmoniously with the international ecosystem, and both sides of it can benefit from this huge growth potential and also the access to capital and markets.
Interesting. So interesting chat about how technology is sort of becoming the futuristic bed of everything that's going to grow. Some of the policies that are going to go in that direction. How data is becoming the new oil and so forth. Talk about the humanistic side. You mentioned that your PhD was also had some elements of this, technology and humanity kind of thing. I recently had the opportunity to speak at Google in New York, where the premise was AI and humanity. And one of the premise of my talk was Generation Alpha, which is going to be the generation born between 2010 and 2025, as the first generation born into AI. So we've talked about how, earlier generations that are sort of transforming and taking this new machine partnership in and so forth, and have the opportunity to do big things with it and so forth. The specific question is about children that are being born into this machine era. Their engagement with this machine is potentially at a different level, because even the toys that they're being exposed to have some semblance of AI and embedment of intelligence built in it. What do you think would be sort of difference in a child that's sort of getting on this journey and taking that journey with a better understanding of its counterpart, the machine, versus some of the ones that had got exposure to it maybe at a later stage of their life?
I think AI in general, development path of AI is in embryonic stages. And you look at how AI is being developed, and actually, frankly speaking, I think it's concerning. Right? the first mover things that AI is being deployed into are things like advertising, commerce, how to get people sucked in to show more product, right? Or AI weapons, how to effectively kill more people, right? And so if there was if you believe that AI eventually is going to get more and more intelligent, sophisticated, and they're specialized now, but eventually there's going to develop some sort of general intelligence, and they're going to have to make a lot of more moral and ethical type decisions. And eventually, if you believe in the long term that eventually this will become more self-aware and things like that, think about raising a kid in an environment where you're just trying to induce violence on people or to hypnotize people to do your bidding. So I think we're on a track right now where AI is starting to go into directions which have, if you look in the long term, will have consequences that are not good for you. But only, and we have Elon Musk, and we have a lot of celebrity people who are speaking about the potential problems with that. Right. How do we fix this? I think we are starting to look at AI ethics, and there's a very Isaac Asimov created a series called Robot Foundations, robotics series, right? And in it, he talks about how AI is developed with the laws of robotics. In those laws of robotics are humanistic, intrinsically humanistic value systems. You cannot hurt people. And if we need to start to think about how to train AIs, develop AIs with human value systems if we want them to use that we align to, right? And so then we need to start early, because this bifurcates very, very quickly. And so I believe that time is now to start thinking about how to create frameworks where human value is included such that AIs will develop in a graceful way and coexist with humanity in a cooperative way. Because again, right now, if you look at the long tail, right, you believe that it's a competitive thing, humans against robots. There's so many sci-fi movies talking about this. Eventually, when robots get sophisticated or become aware and have the capability to do so, they're going to try to annihilate the other side. It's the whole Skynet, Terminator, kind of scenario, right? So the only way to stop that is if they feel that people are more cooperative and there's a synergy between humans and robots. And I think the answer is eventually both sides will merge, and that's the opportunity. So from my standpoint, I see AI to be a massively empowering thing.
Empowering thing for
humanity.
For humanity.
Because, really everybody, every human, in my opinion, should have the opportunity, almost as a right, to pursue in the most effective manner possible their dreams and aspirations, whatever it may be. Their individualism, their individual expression of art, their pursuit of love, their pursuit of truth, these type of things.
But I'll add something to that. So, individual aspiration, pursuit of love, pursuit of life, in the grander sense, existed for people maybe of our generation that had no influence of any kind. The more and more we are relying on technology to live our lives potentially, I look at how Google framed my mind towards certain information that it needs to get to me. If I'm buying something on Amazon, it invariably tells me that these are the people that have also bought this, and so forth. Netflix is a brilliant example. It's learned me over time, and it only sort of points me in the direction where it wants to point me. And me, as an advanced user, pretty much rely on recommendations that are coming out of these machines that have learned me over time to head me in that direction. What my fear is that going forward, in the case of humanity, as these companies learn the humanity to an extent where they can almost run a play on a child based on either their DNA or their ethnic value or their nationality, and so forth, and sort of keep them in that direction. So in that case, and that was my, the case I made with the Generation Alpha piece at Google as well. Do these kids get to choose their life going forward, or is someone that's programming with their own biases of today choose it for them?
Well, currently, right now, the answer is there's no framework in place to prevent companies from taking advantage of it. Right? So just look at the phenomenon of Fortnite, a game where it's been explicitly designed with gamification to psychologically fix players and keep them online. And that's at the moment a completely valid business model. Like, as a company who's trying to sell, Fortnite the game, they're allowed to do that. However, at what point does that become manipulative? And at that point, there's so much societal damage, and actually is maybe ethically, based. That where's that line? That line is obviously not a clear-cut line; it's a gray line, and people have to give opinions on it, right? But I have hope because I feel that society is waking up to it. As we become more of a conscious community, as we all start to understand that all humanity are equal, right? And that they should have rights, that you can treat each other as a golden rule type stuff. Then you start to understand that some certain principles are important. So, in regards to push back with Cambridge Analytica, Facebook, and how people's privacy data get exploited, and that is now pretty much not revoked. Right? Sort of old school .com era business models, extractive. How do I get people's data? How do I sucker people into giving me their data? How do I just leverage that data in which way I can to maximize sales? That kind of mindset is falling way to more of a social responsibility kind of framework, where we're not allowed to take advantage. We all understand now that that old way of thinking is not something that resonates with the way people should behave, or companies should behave. It's more social responsibility to the public, right? So I think it's of society, and that will become something that the population will not allow, and we will hopefully evolve to a state where more collaborative, more equitable, more harmonious sort of business models and ways of interacting.
Is this scary?
I think there's this whole age, since the beginning of humanity, there's the age old concept of good and evil. Basically, we have two forces. People or entities which are using the means at their disposal, which includes technology, which now includes AI, for helping society and destructive to society. And what that means is different. People have completely different notions of what's good and bad. But there's this age old one. So certainly the eventual vision of Elon Musk presents, that is a possibility. That's a future scenario, which is, I don't know how likely it is, but it is certainly a scenario to be concerned about. And the way society is built now is such that by default you will have assimilation, and game theoretically you will have conflict that will annihilate one side, good versus evil, whatever that's defined. So what I can do is not be worried about that eventuality, but try to, in my way, and everybody in society should do this, to move to the other side, to be a force of a warrior of the light, and to be more collaborative. We already know, game theory already tells us, if we collaborate, we can all get to a better place. Now it's just whether or not you're cynical enough to want to join forces with good. And I think that's a snowball. Right now, in this environment, we're moving in the wrong direction. There is us versus them, which is very competitive, very zero-sum. But that's consciousness. We already know theoretically there is a side. I can treat everyone else as family. If everybody all of a sudden magically in their brain started treating everyone else, I think the world just treat as everyone else as a mother, the world would instantly phase into a scenario where it's positively constructed. And I think with technologies like blockchain, we have the ability to now use a framework which can create trust in areas where there wasn't trust before. It can make people possible. So I am personally very positive about the future. I believe that actually one of the paths of humanity in my way is to try to bridge the gap between the West and the East. I'm in general just trying to be at the intersection of connecting technology to business, to government, to people, and creating frameworks where we can actually have omni-wins and scenarios where everybody can be for and benefit and be equitable and things like that. So certainly, I see a vision of the future where
No, I see a vision of the future where songology replaces songology. I think that's where we're headed. So you talked about the future. Getting ready for the future is a very essential component of the future. We talked about a younger workforce, active energy markets, and so forth. If you were to give one advice to kids in high school right now that have the potential to go out, make a mark, assuming you're back in high school, about to go to MIT or other places, what would you ready yourself with, regardless of the career path you chose or the subjects you learned and so forth? What would be the 2 or 3 things that are almost essential for as tools, as directionally sort of futuristic things that they should arm themselves with in the future?
I think there are probably 3 pieces that I would give as advice to any young buck who's out there trying to make it in the world. Right? One is, as you know, the world is rapidly changing, and that change is accelerating. And the driver of that acceleration is technology. And so, therefore, in order to most input to give us opportunity and to be competitive to other people, and to enable your own capability to do things, you need to, as much as possible, be tech savvy. Okay. Understand. And that doesn't mean you need to go and get your AI.
Yeah, what do you mean by tech savvy? I mean, I guess it's, when I go around the world and I teach not only young folks, but also C-suite and board members about technology and governance and so forth, they almost invariably ask me this question: what do we learn?
So here's one, again, the deeper suggestion is you do not have to go, people who are technologically inclined, they have to be a programmer and all this kind of stuff. Great, right? But for maybe a majority of people, that's not their thing. Right. However, being tech savvy does not mean you need to know how that learning problem works. Being tech savvy means you know how technology can be leveraged in your specific market. So a good example is the internet, right? I mean, we all know how to use the internet, how to leverage it to get information, how to use e-commerce technology so that I can sell products and things like that. You do not have to know the underlying protocol of TCP and how it works, or know how to program it. I can get other people to do that. Right. You need to know how technology is going to impact you. Okay. What other people are doing in my peer group or the circle or ecosystem I care about to see how they're doing. What kind of business models are using and how to apply that. So that's how I actually, I think that curricula at the university. That's why these days people are teaching fintech like fundamentals. They mostly focus on the technology. Oh, this is blockchain. This is how the mining algorithm works for Bitcoin, all this kind of stuff. And I don't even go there because you don't need to. I'm teaching a bunch of MBA students and master's undergrad students. I teach all about implication. Right. I talk about business models. I talk about big companies and what they're doing. I'm talking about how to use it. So the one aspect is technology sophistication or savviness. Second category is entrepreneurship. Okay. And what I mean by entrepreneurship is that if you're an entrepreneur, you know how to think, take advantage of opportunity in a resource-constrained environment. Okay. I don't mean you need to do a startup, which is actually in many cases, there's a certain type of personality which thrives in that. People who don't do well in that environment. So it does not mean you have to be a startup person. It means that you know how to identify opportunities. You know how to see how trends work, what in the market are pain points, and figure out what you can do. And then, now if you're tech savvy, you know how to leverage technology to solve that. And then figure out how to get resources in a resource environment. You don't have money, you don't have engineers, you don't have access to providers. How to figure out creative ways to leverage that to do the things that you want to do. And artists is the other thing. Right? It doesn't have to be making money, it's just how to get more access to their thing. So that skill set is, I think, invaluable to you. And the key aspect of this is just understanding, demystifying that anybody can do this. I teach this class, and it was in Hong Kong, a bunch of PhDs and a bunch of MBA students, and they're mixed. And I teach them, like my class, I'm like, in the beginning of class, I ask them, how many of you guys think that you guys are going to be an entrepreneur? It's literally 1 or 2 people. And by the end of the semester, I ask this question, and that goes up to demystify the process of thinking, an entrepreneurial mindset, to allow people to take advantage of resources, to take advantage of things in a resource-constrained environment, to make something out of it, is a very useful skill. And that combined with the tool set of technology allows you to march into any direction and take advantage of that, the way that you want to. So you have two things. You have the entrepreneurial stuff, which allows you to laterally think about how to connect the dots and make stuff happen. Technology allows you, gives you the most powerful tools by which to make that stuff happen and execute. The third thing is important is just knowing which direction to go. Okay.
Is that the hardest one?
Is the hardest one because most people, especially young generations, they do what I call kill time. Okay. They just look around them and say, where it's higher. If you imagine, a landscape, how happy you are, right? You want to find your Mount Everest, right? Then the basic strategy is called hill climbing. You just look around you and kind of see where it's higher, you go in that direction. Climb the hill, right? You get your education, you go join Goldman Sachs and you work hard, you rise up the ranks until you make a partner. Right. Everybody naturally knows how to hill climb. Right. But the issue with this is it's myopic. Are you climbing the right hill? Right. You're climbing the hill to be finance, like a baker, right? But you're really a rock star incarnate, and you should climb. Your Mount Everest is completely opposite of the direction you want to. Okay, so then that's the general problem I think most people have, right? And that's why you have people partners burn out and then immediately start a bakery. I literally know a dozen.
No, and I think that dovetails into them finally figuring out what I'm naturally not really good at, what makes me happy. And one of the things that it's funny you say that. So I taught customer relationship management, cloud computing DePaul University for almost a decade in the graduate program in the US. And one of the things I always talk about where you're heading in this conversation is the importance of learning failure and understanding failure from that lens. Because the example you gave was coming out of college and jumping up the ladder of a partnership of an investment bank is a typical scenario of success that's been laid out. Now, innovative environment or digital environment or AI-enabled environment are more prone to failures because you are going to not succeed every time. Your innovation will not give you the positive result for the first maybe 100 times, and then it's going to start to come through as well because you're going to build on those failures as well and so forth. So talk about the concept of this failure from your perspective and any examples from your life or any others that you've seen that kind of help the cause of this, looking at failure differently.
Well, as you know, the concept of failure is very culturally driven, right? And specifically with Asian type cultures, the failure is something that is very fun,
absolutely,
and it's a very scary thing.
Right, it is,
and so people avoid it. However, as you point out, failure is the fundamental way by which people learn. If you look at how babies learn to walk, it's because they trip and fall 100 times they have to figure out what not to do. And through that process, it kind of there's a very famous phrase. It's like, to get to the other side of the river, you need to feel the same. You need to have experimentation, and by virtue of the fact that operation succeeds, you fail and try to get up and try again to figure out the path forward. So I actually teach this to my students. The notion of randomness. Randomness is something that people tend to minimize. People want routine. People want to have stability. People feel that randomness is a negative force in their lives. I teach to my students the exact opposite. I say embrace randomness. Because, like it or not, that's how the world is.
Well, do you think they don't because they don't understand how to quantify or how to come up with the right success metric or parameter around it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it's randomness always throws a wrench into whatever process that you're doing. So if you just want to make money or you want to do this, you're trying to minimize randomness. That's how you optimize it. Well, all I'm saying is that everything's defensive. If you optimize a process, you become very good at that particular thing, right? But the instant you go and throw a wrench in it, and the environment changes, you are very maladapted to that change. And now, I've already just said, life is about unexpected examples. It's a truism, right? It's the only truism that
randomness, change.
So therefore, you cannot completely mitigate randomness. So I say embrace it. It's a balance. Okay? So, randomness, what does that mean in a more philosophical sense? It means opportunity. It means the ability to latch on to things that you don't really know. So, and I think there's a balance between order and disorder, randomness and structure. Okay? And we need both to be adaptive to the environment. And most people are structured to the point that they novelty. So, I believe that the best way to live life is to have a certain percentage of your life to be structured in a certain percentage. Now, a good example of this is Google 20% time.
That's amazing. So, I absolutely love that.
Right, exactly. So in Google 20% time, Google had the wisdom of saying 20% of the engineer's time, one day out of the 5 days, they can go and do whatever they want, right? The other 4 days, you're doing the structure stuff, you're making money for the business, but the other thing and that has led to Google, I think, fundamentally to be such an innovation leader. Right? So many products like Google and AdSense and major technologies came out of the 20% that were completely unexpected from Google's primary business line. It's unexpected because we're friendly.
Well, and not only that, it's a big sort of attrition minimizer as well in that case, because you're not just bound to your day job. There's a act of hey, I'm open to the world embedded into your thinking.
Yeah, the bottom line is you cannot plan for change because change is going so rapidly. You need to have an adapt this rapidly. And I think Steve Jobs had a very good analogy. He gave this he tells these stories. Okay, story number 2, right, where he talks about wasn't very good student, he goes to college, he learns about this
calligraphy,
typography, which is the study of fonts. Right. This is very abstruse, totally not practical. He could have been programming, right? Learning, but the practical hill climbing thing to do is programming and learn studying with typography. And then, a handful of years later, he goes into Apple because he had been exposed to beautiful typography and fonts. He made sure that this is an important part of the and then, lo and behold, because he was valuable company in the world, and it has his DNA. We trace back to the random class that he had. And he says, well, going forward, I'm not planning for that. But looking backward, I can trace a definitive line of random experiences that has led me to have the DNA that I have, and experiences that I have that eventually became something great that I can come. What's my point? My point is, if he were hill climbing 100% practical guy, would have been a good programmer, a good investment banker, never settled out. So there's a balance. Okay, you got to earn your living. Okay, you cannot just be a starving artist. There's some people do this, but I think that's also an extreme on the other way, where they do. Other people are just bouncing all over the place, and that's not good either. There's a balance. Okay? And actually, you know what? The universe optimizes itself in certain ways. And that
we don't control.
But there's some principles. So you've heard of the concept of the golden ratio. Mm-hmm. Well, my interpretation of the golden ratio is balance. The balance of structure and not randomness. Order and disorder. The structure provides the ability to have a platform to do something meaningful. The disorder represents opportunity and novelty that gives you new things that you can incorporate into your life that might be meaningful. Now, if you're 100% structure and you're 100% disorder, I would argue those are both equally bad things. Right. Structure, if you're fully structured, you're completely maladapted to it. Right. You can adjust. If you're fully disordered, it's like a gas bouncing around, and you can't take any advantage of things that you find. The balance point is the harmony point. And it so happens that golden ratio makes a lot of sense. Very, I think, philosophically intriguing. It's not 50-50.
Yeah, it could be 35, 75, or even 33.5, whatever. That's right. But how do you? Interesting point though. So how do you map this to? You suggested talk about the future of work. We've done some work around that as well in terms of learning the next generation enterprise and how people need to sort of take their careers in that direction as well. So from a future of work perspective, one of our theories that have come out from TransformX and our way of thinking is that obviously traditional career paths, because of these new age technologies and introducing randomness or change into the process, go out of the way. You may have potentially platforms that you can sort of apply your skill set and a tool to, kind of like a Upwork or Uber or something for careers, for everything. What's your view on the future of work from that lens or another lens? And as people, as we tie the earlier question of what do people need to get ready themselves from a technology perspective, how do you see the future of work happening with all these different scenarios?
Okay, so this is interesting, right? Here's my notion. Right now, humanity, let's go back to your discussion. How can AI and humanity harmonize? Right? And my notion is humanity can totally leverage AI for its benefit. How? Because AI at this moment, before it becomes sentient, right, is a tool, things like automation, to be able to help humans to avoid repetitious work. If you look at the industrial revolutions, it's always about Industrial Revolution 1 with the boom, industrialization, the steam engines, humans and animal power can now be replaced by machine power. So freed up humans to not toil around physical labor. And then computerization in the 80s allow you to replace the need for calculations and stuff like that. Then internet era, et cetera, et cetera. Right? Now in the fourth industrial revolution, we're talking about automation, right? Automation is going to automate,
plenty of.
If you believe the numbers, 60% of the tasks by within the next 10 years, right? Across the board, which sounds very scary.
Right.
But if you literally take a newspaper in the 1800s talking about how the steam engine is going to be take away jobs, it's the same exact thing.
Absolutely.
Now, looking back, the lens of history, you would never argue that you want to go back to that state. Life has gotten better for most humanity, outside of the people who are kind of left, unfortunately, in the transition because they cannot adapt to change. So likewise, this world of AI is powerfully empowering humanity. It will free people to stop doing the menial stuff. And all those jobs will be lost to AI, no doubt. But it will free humanity to do the things that are important. As I mentioned before, it's the pursuit and the creation of beauty, of truth, of love. These are the most humanistic qualities. And I would argue that outside of the transition, AI will empower people to focus on what they care about. They're truly passionate in their being, and how to align their true being to what they want to do. And everybody should stay in the sweet spot. Nobody needs to go and do the full thing because there'll be other people or automation AI agents that's
going to complete that part that they don't possess.
Yeah, exactly. So the future of work, in my opinion, I've been thinking about this notion. I'm very intrigued in automating innovation.
Okay.
And that seems like a fool's errand. It seems like innovation is so abstract that how do you automate? But I think it can. I'm a venture builder, and what I do is I find technologists with amazing technology, with people who know how to operate things and manage, right? With finance people who invest in stuff, with people who are connected to government, with other people who have industry-specific things. What I do is I tie them all up into a framework where everybody's incentivized harmoniously, so that this can now take off and become a real endeavor and a sustainable one. And I work on the strategy and business model as far as spinning this thing. So I call that venture building. I've been thinking, and that's how I do business. But now I've been thinking about how to automate. That's the future, isn't it? Right. To be able to, if you will, create APIs between how people interact.
Interesting.
To standardize that so that you can reduce the frictions of how people do stuff. Right. Be able to automate that using AI.
Templatize that.
Yeah. And then templatize that and also use smart contracts to enforce that. Right. So now people are trusted, it's all automated. Right. Okay. So let's say we have this framework, and there's a notion called the decentralized autonomous organization, a DAO, which is the ability for these autonomous agents to interact with the larger picture so that they can harmonize and synergize and to interact collaboratively to do good. My notion at the sort of building company or making products or creating value type state. And you can already imagine how to automate that. And actually, I've been putting together a set of partners and pieces to eventually do it. Now, let's just assume that framework exists. Not everybody should just stay in their sweet spot. Because this is, again, the comparative advantage. Why are you doing, if I'm an MBA guy and I'm trying to create an AI company, I should not be doing the AI programming myself. That doesn't make sense.
It's a waste of resources as well. Right. You can find somebody cheaper, better than you doing it.
That's right. So you see this all the time. If you want to take part of the AI revolution, the baseline thing, you get a bunch of MBAs who are not putting together a C-level AI team to do it. That's not the way to do it. So what I say is, guys, stay in your sweet spot. Find what use your entrepreneurial skills to go and find what the industry pain points are, solve that need, understand how the dynamics how to do that business, and then outsource the AI work to someone else who's doing better. And then if we can create a framework by which these two parties have a agreed upon share of the pie, then everybody stays in their sweet spot. Just do the thing that you're passionate about, that you're good at, and then you interact with other people. And right now that interaction is kind of bilateral, right? There are people doing that. But now with this framework of a DAO-like infrastructure where everybody's kind of just doing their thing, and then you can, from a meta level, start to create organizations that can start to interact harmoniously, right? And then eventually all these things, interactions can become more and more automated because the lower level stuff can be automated. People will push the boundaries, just focus on imagination, creativity, and whatever, and the whole society will take off. And once you start this collaborative framework, you realize you're better off collaborating. Right. You're better off not to clobber the other person because they're going to provide value to you. And there's a trusted framework with maybe smart contracts which prevent them from clobbering you back. Anyway, yeah. Right? So therefore, everybody starts to work together, stays in their sweet spot, is passionate about the things that they want to do, and society gets better. I totally believe that we're in an era where universal basic income will come to pass. I.e., you do not need to work, toil, or labor just to survive. Yes, survive the needs. And then you can start thinking, it goes up Maslow's law of hierarchy of needs. And then you're not worried about dying of starvation, and you start thinking about other people. And you start thinking about what you're passionate about. And this is why that third point is you need to find your non-Everest. If you stop hill climbing, focus more on what your North Star should be. Align your North Star to what you are as a being, right? And march in that direction. Now you might have to do practical things and hill climb and survive right now until my condition version of the eye comes in. But go in that direction. Right? If you're on a landscape and your Mount Everest is in this direction, you're not going to hill climb this way. Right? Just go in the direction that you set. And that direction might change, I think, more and more. And evolve. Yeah. But at least you have a compass by which to map your passion.
We're talking about being in equilibrium with ourselves, which is not been the hardest thing to get. Who's been your inspiration? I mean, you have a very well-rounded view of the East and the West, the human side, the technology side. I've not met many people that have that well a perspective that connects all the dots and so forth. Have there been any people in your life that have really influenced your thinking? Are there any certain books that you subscribe to that have sort of shaped your thinking to get to this level of heights?
Well, I think unfortunately, if you had to push me, for example, of who my inspiration would be, unfortunately, it's a very common answer. So I wish I'm racking my mind and trying to think of someone else, to not give me a common answer. But I have, to be honest, the person that really I think inspired me really is Elon Musk. Okay. And I remember in 2014, before Elon had actually manifested a lot of the things that he did, I thought he was crazy. I remember, at that time, students, I was teaching entrepreneurial classes, and students would be like, what do you think of that? And I made a bold prediction. It wasn't so bold. I was like, Elon is just going to fail because he's done so many things that are so hard, and he's doing 3 of those things at the same time. And, there's no way he's going to succeed. I think he's going to fall hard, right? And he manifested each one of those things. He manifested Tesla, he manifested SpaceX, he manifested now he's going to a boring company, Neuralink. And all of these things seem ridiculous when he announces them, right? They really seem impossible feats. And he's been able to have that vision. Okay? He has that North Star firm. And it's an bold vision of what he wants. And fortunately for him, he has a combination of resources, and he is the will, the strength a little bit. I met him. Entrepreneurship is like what he does. staring into this. Okay? He didn't have a positive notion of what he was doing. He's obviously a people guy, he obviously had a lot of responsibility and stress, anxiety.
The world's looking up to him.
So certainly that's something I think you can maybe correct or do better, right? But he has that vision to be able to do so. So certainly he has my respect, and I certainly have my own ambitious, I would say, vision of how I can help enable humanity, and I would like to want to go in the direction to be as powerful as yet.
More power to you. We have all the right. Seems like we have all the right ingredients, the right way of thinking, and I wish you all the best in that journey, if you will, to continue to inspire us and so forth. And thank you. This has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. I hope first of many more to come to sort of digest and dissect where things are going. And we wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Zong.